my backyard, snapping pictures. I grabbed my phone and walked out, asking them what they were doing. They smiled and said they were just excited to see the property. They had RSVP'd for the open house. I told them it was not for sale, and they looked at each other, confused. The woman held up her phone and showed me an invitation from what appeared to be a wedding planning website that described my property as available for both short-term and long-term rental, with an upcoming public viewing date. I asked who had made the post. It was listed under a profile called Karen W. Event. I started documenting everything: screenshots, photos, videos. I created a folder on my computer labeled Karen Chronicles. I updated the security cameras on my porch and driveway. I posted a sign on my gate that read "Private property, no trespassing, not for sale, not a venue." I used 4 nails and made sure the font was large enough for a satellite to read. Still, people came. Couples driving hybrids with out-of-state plates. Young women in heels taking selfies in front of my barn. One woman asked me if she could see the bridal suite. I told her the only suite on the property belonged to a raccoon, and she was welcome to meet him at her own risk. Then came the most surreal moment of all. A delivery truck arrived with boxes of folding chairs and a portable gazebo. The driver told me he was dropping them off for the rehearsal. I told him he was mistaken. He showed me the delivery slip, my address, my name, signed off by someone named Karen Winters. I refused the shipment and called the rental company. The man on the line apologized profusely and explained that the entire wedding had been coordinated through phone calls and emails. He assumed Karen was the homeowner. She had even submitted a copy of what she claimed was a deed in her name. I asked if he still had it. He emailed it to me. It was a low-resolution photocopy with my property description and a signature that looked like it had been drawn by someone using their non-dominant hand while riding a horse. I sent the forged document to my lawyer. She called me 20 minutes later, furious. "That is criminal," she said. "That is not just pushing boundaries. That is outright fraud." She recommended we prepare to file a restraining order and consider legal action for attempted identity misrepresentation. I agreed. But before we could even file, things escalated again. A construction crew showed up to measure the front gate. I intercepted them halfway up the driveway. They told me they had been hired to widen the entrance to allow for vendor trucks and a shuttle. I told them if they so much as scratched one nail on that gate, I would sue everyone from their supervisor to their company mascot. They left. Barely. I stood there, arms crossed, as they turned around in the gravel and kicked up dust like a warning shot. But I didn't move. I was done being polite. That night I installed a second layer of fencing around the outer edge of the property. Not because I thought it would stop anyone determined, but because it sent a message. This is not available. Not negotiable. Not happening. The next morning, someone had spray-painted the outer fence. Just one word. So. I stared at it for a long time before repainting the boards and adding floodlights to the side of the barn. I knew who had done it. I had no proof, but I knew. Karen's persistence was no longer just pushy. It was obsession. I got an anonymous email that same afternoon. No subject line. Just a message that read, "You could really make something beautiful out of that place. Why not let it be loved?" There was a photo attached of a wedding ceremony mock-up with rows of chairs stretching across my backyard and a flower arch directly in front of my tool shed. I forwarded it to my lawyer. Then I printed it out and pinned it to the fridge. Not because I wanted to look at it. Because I wanted a reminder that there are people who believe charm is a substitute for consent. I wasn't going to be one of them. My farmhouse was not a fantasy. It was a home. It held the memories of my grandparents' laughter, the sound of rain on the tin roof, the smell of firewood in December. It had character not because it was old, but because it had lived. And I would be damned if I let someone steal its story and call it love. I had just finished watering the marigolds near the porch when I heard the rumble of tires on gravel, followed by voices that did not belong. I turned the corner of the house and froze. A rental company truck was parked halfway up my driveway, and a group of workers were unloading a tent frame. Not just any tent either. A white cathedral-style wedding tent with floral trim and a sign taped to the side that read reserved, Winter's Wedding Rehearsal. For a moment I thought maybe I was dreaming, but the sound of someone hammering a stake into my vegetable patch reminded me I was not. I ran up to the man with the clipboard and asked who had authorized this. He looked at me like I was the one interrupting and said everything had already been paid for. He gestured toward a folded document in his hand and showed me a sheet with my address and Karen's name written across the top as the venue coordinator. I told him in no uncertain terms that he needed to stop and get every single item off my land before I called the police. He laughed nervously and said he was just doing his job. I asked him if his job included trespassing. That got his attention. Just then a silver Lexus pulled up, and Karen stepped out in a silk blouse and wedge heels like she was arriving at a brunch instead of a battlefield. She walked right past me and began pointing at various spots in the yard. "Tables will go here," she said to no one in particular. "And the catering van will stay behind the barn, out of sight." I stood directly in front of her and said she had 5 seconds to get off my land. She didn't even blink. She waved a hand and said, "It's only for one day. You can just relax and enjoy the view." I told her she was not only insane but criminally trespassing. Her face changed then. Gone was the fake smile and the airy charm. She looked at me like I was the one being unreasonable. She said, "You're ruining my daughter's dream. Do you even understand how hard it is to find the right place for something like this?" I told her I understood plenty. I understood she had ignored every word I said for weeks. I understood she had listed my home without consent, forged documents, and now brought an army to take over my land like it was an empty field on a game board. I understood she thought my silence meant weakness. By now, the tent crew had stopped setting up and were looking between us awkwardly. I took out my phone and began recording. Karen snapped her head toward me and said I couldn't film her. I said I absolutely could, especially on my own property. That's when she made her first mistake. She reached out and tried to swat the phone from my hand. I didn't flinch, but I kept filming. Her voice rose, telling the workers to continue, that she had every right, that I was making this more difficult than it needed to be. I sent the video to the sheriff immediately. 15 minutes later, 2 patrol cars pulled up. One of the deputies who had been to my place before stepped out and looked exhausted. He asked Karen if she had received the formal warning filed 2 days ago. She said she thought it was just a misunderstanding. The deputy walked over to the workers and calmly explained that they were trespassing and needed to remove their equipment. Most of them didn't even argue. They packed up quickly and left without another word. Karen stood there fuming, arms crossed, watching her vision unravel. But it didn't stop there. That night, I posted the video online. I titled it HOA Karen Stages Wedding Rehearsal on my farmhouse without permission. It spread faster than I expected. Within 24 hours, it had over 300,000 views. People left comments ranging from disbelief to fury. Some called her entitled. Others asked how this could even be legal. A few offered to come and help me build a fence. My inbox filled with messages of support. News outlets started reaching out asking for permission to use the footage. I gave them all the same answer. As long as the story is told right, you can use it. Karen did not take kindly to going viral. The next day, she showed up outside my property with a printed statement and a small group of women from her HOA board. She read it aloud into a phone camera, trying to paint herself as a misunderstood planner just trying to create magic for her daughter. She said I was being unnecessarily hostile and that I had exaggerated everything. She even accused me of doctoring the footage. The performance would have been almost impressive if it weren't so pathetic. But she had underestimated the internet. Within hours, people were digging into her HOA history. Turns out I wasn't the first person she had tried to coerce into giving up property. A man from the next town posted his own story about Karen trying to force a gazebo onto his land for a neighborhood event. Another woman said Karen tried to fine her for painting her mailbox a color not listed in the HOA guidelines, even though she wasn't part of the association either. The stories kept coming. In response, the Willow Creek HOA board released a quiet statement distancing themselves from Karen's actions. They claimed they were unaware of her attempts to use private property for personal events and that any such actions were done outside her role as chair. But everyone knew what that meant. They were trying to save face before they got dragged into the mess. Then came the biggest shock. I received an email from a woman named Diane who claimed to be a former member of the Willow Creek HOA. She said she had once worked closely with Karen and that there were rumors Karen had plans to acquire several properties near the edge of the HOA to create a connected community center. She said Karen had even joked about how easy it would be to convince people to sell once a few upgrades were made. I asked her for proof. She sent me a scanned note from one of the planning meetings. Scribbled at the bottom was a phrase that chilled me. Acquire farmhouse before summer. Wedding as anchor event. That was all the confirmation I needed. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't about a daughter's dream or a pretty backdrop. This was a campaign. A coordinated plan to take what she wanted by force of suggestion, paperwork, and persistence. And if she thought I was going to roll over now, she had no idea what kind of war she had started. Because I wasn't just fighting for a house. I was fighting for every person who'd ever been told their home was worth less than someone else's dream. The following morning was quiet, too quiet for a place that had become a battleground. I was sipping coffee by the window when I saw another envelope stuck between the slats of my front gate. I walked out slowly, half expecting a dead dove or a subpoena. It was neither. Instead, it was an invitation again. This time professionally printed, complete with gold foil edging and a scripted font that read, "You are cordially invited to the wedding rehearsal of Emily Winters and Tyler Grant." Beneath it was the time, date, and location. My property, in bold. No disclaimers. No asterisk. Just my farmhouse listed like it was a venue. I stared at it for a full minute before laughter bubbled out of me. Not because it was funny. Because it was absurd. Because this woman still believed if she printed enough paper, she could will my house into hers. I called the sheriff again. This time I wasn't just reporting harassment. I was filing formal charges. Trespassing. Fraud. Property misrepresentation. My lawyer had already drawn up a cease and desist order, and we sent it directly to Karen's address by courier. Along with it, we attached the video evidence, screen captures from the forged listings, and the fake deed she had submitted to the rental company. It was airtight, but even that didn't slow her down. Because the next day, her daughter showed up. She was younger than I expected. Early 20s, pretty in a carefully managed way. Expensive shoes, oversized sunglasses, and that same chilling confidence her mother carried. She didn't knock. She just stood at the gate, arms crossed, waiting until I came out. When I did, she lifted her chin and said, "You need to stop ruining this for everyone." I blinked, stunned. She continued, "My mom has worked for months to plan this. It's already in motion. The guests are coming. The vendors are booked. It's too late to stop it now." I told her none of that was my problem. That her wedding was not more important than my rights. She shook her head and said, "Do you know what it's like to grow up dreaming of something and have it ripped away by a bitter stranger with a grudge?" I took a breath. I told her, "Do you know what it's like to wake up every day wondering which part of your life someone will try to steal next?" She didn't respond. She just stared, like she couldn't comprehend the idea that I wouldn't be swayed by sentiment. Then she pulled out her phone and started filming. I asked her what she was doing. She said, "Just making sure everyone sees how cruel you are." I told her to get off my land. She refused. So I stepped back, dialed the sheriff's office on speaker, and reported an uninvited guest. When she realized I wasn't bluffing, she finally turned and walked away. But not before saying, "You'll